Background: single-person chambers, SPCs, had taken decades to develop, with some crushing setbacks. But all the bugs were worked out by mid-century and humans could be transferred from one location to another instantaneously. The technology achieved instant popularity, despite its 0.03% failure rate, which was far lower than that of any other transportation means of the time. And, of course, the fact that it was instantaneous made it all the more appealing. But the single-user system had its downside, since a chamber had to recharge between uses, making it inconvenient for mass use. Now, almost a decade later, the technology had been improved to allow 2 people, and the plan was to make it virtually unlimited. But first, they had to be sure that the differentiation algorithm that had been developed would allow the doubling of capacity, and more. It was an unusual breach of protocol for anyone to enter the office of the corporate director of operations without first being announced by his secretary or at least knocking. "We've been given the go-ahead to begin human testing," announced the interloper. "Calm down, Dr. Vellenor, I already know," replied Dr. Varley Transom. "How soon will the system be ready for the volunteers?" "We already have the first pair briefed and ready." "Would tomorrow morning be too soon?" The good doctor's lower lip was trembling with excitement. He had spent many long hours and sleepless nights in anticipation of this breakthrough. The first couple are in fact married couple who work on the project. So they are sufficiently technically skilled to provide useful feedback on their experiences related to the process? Absolutely. Adam Smith is a field theory mathematician who worked on the spatial transfer interfaces. His spouse, Arlene Jones, was the lead technician on the team that designed the pod environmentals. Excellent. Please inform me of the testing schedule so that I can have my schedule arranged appropriately. Do you plan to oversee the operations personally? Oh no, doctor, I will simply be there to observe, and if needed obfuscate some of the new bureaucratic interference that is intended to clutter this process with ridiculous and schedule-killing nuances. But I'm also interested in meeting those brave volunteers of yours. The visiting doctor grinned broadly. An excellent strategy, sir. I have a meeting scheduled with my team the afternoon, and will forward the schedule to you as soon as we have finalized. They may not actually be tomorrow, but to welcoming you to our human testing. Later that day, the small conference room buried deep within the huge facility vibrated with anxiety and excitement as the team met to plan for the first live human testing of the project they'd been working on for years. Good. Now that we have the schedule finalized, Lorraine, please send that to Dr. Transom immediately. I hope he's not disappointed that we delayed the first test for another day, but it can't be helped. We have to get those transoms recalibrated, and I want a full 24/7 effort on that, understood Malcolm. Absolutely, replied the bespectacled technical chief. Nodding, Dr. Vellenor continued. So now for the last item, apparel. What should the subject be allowed to wear, if anything? I favor nothing. We need to observe any anomalies and clothing will interfere with that. Noted, Marcus, but your fixation on nudity is already well established. There was a general snicker around the table, everyone recalling an incident in the lab involving the handsome team member and a pretty young apprentice who later pleaded that she'd somehow lost her blouse and panties. It wasn't one of the otherwise smug misogynist Marcus Jensen's more treasured memories. Besides, Dr. Vellenor added, our test subjects are a married couple and may not agree to that. However, the argument is valid, so I suggest we have them wear either bathing suits or their normal underwear. There was a general consensual nod, even by Mr. Jensen. Very well, let's get to it. 3 days later, the couple introduced to the director were in their late 20s and had been married only a couple of years. They could have easily been randomly chosen by lottery from the population. Although with the advent of inexpensive cosmetic procedures, the average was a good deal more visually appealing than it had been in the past. Adam Smith was just under 6 foot with a trim-fit physique, longish hair that covered his ears, and a smooth squarish face. Like most men of his generation, he'd chosen to have his whiskers removed to avoid a lifetime of inconvenient shaving. Arlene Jones was a striking vision of femaleness. Her 5 feet 8 inches frame was perfectly curvaceous with an above-average bosom, long chestnut hair, brilliant blue eyes, and a radiant complexion. "It's an honor, sir," Oliver mewed respectfully as they all shook hands in the old-fashioned greeting that still held considerable respect in the high reaches of corporate domains. "Likewise," replied the CDO. "I respect your willingness to be the first test subjects for our new multi-transfer system. And I salute your bravery." There was a slight pinkish blush in Olivia's alabaster cheeks. "Oh, sir, there's really no bravery involved. We've been working on components of this project ourselves, and we have good reason to believe there's no risk. The single-person chambers have been so successful and revolutionized human transportation throughout the world. We see little or no risk, and honored to be the first through the MTS." Yes," was the neutral response. Dr. Vellenor interrupted the awkward silence. "Sorry, sir, but we must get our subjects into position." "Yes, of course." The trio climbed down from the observation chamber to the main laboratory floor. The large vaulted room was lined with an eclectic array of electronic and computer hardware. In the center, separated by about 10 meters, were 2 identical transparent reinforced acrylic glass chambers, each with a metal top festooned with massive cables that wound up to the ceilings, then back via piping and bracketed frames to the surrounding equipment. The director watched as the couple was guided to the chamber on the left, where they disrobed and handed their clothing to a nearby lab assistant, leaving them only in their underwear. Mr. Smith preferred boxers, but had been convinced to wear slightly undersized briefs to facilitate post-test observation of any unforeseen changes in his anatomy. Whether Miss Jones had the same encouragement was unknown, but her sheer satin bikini briefs and lace bra left little to the imagination. It was easy to see her large beige areoles and prominent nipples, and hairless female anatomy, an option many younger women took similar to the male's beard removal. They entered the spacious box and with meticulous care were placed with their feet slightly apart on 2 metallic 3-meter diameter discs set in the floor and separated by a full meter. The two could have touched, even hold hands, but were encouraged to keep all their extremities within the confines of their respective discs. Once technicians gave the all-clear that the subjects were in place and ready, the chamber door was secured, followed by a significant increase in activity. As people worked feverishly at their stations, a low hum of building power began to grow until it was hard to be heard without the earpieces used by all those in the lab who needed them. "Begin the countdown at 5 minutes, came Dr. Vellenor's command over the intercom from his position at the central console directly beneath the director's observation platform. A large digital counter behind the chambers displayed the painfully slow second-by-second regression as a whirlwind of activity continued throughout the chamber. Meanwhile, the subjects stood patiently, almost motionless except for an occasional furtively shared glance and smile of mutual encouragement. At the 2-minute mark, Dr. Vellenor commanded, "All stations, report status." The sequence was already established and none of the responses could be heard, only the his staccato replies of check, 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 until he proclaimed, "Very well, proceed with the test." The clock was down to 43 seconds. "Engage antibacterial," came the command at 37 seconds. A heavy mist filled the chambers, but vanished as quickly. At 28 seconds, confirm systems devoid of non-human presence. Check. At 15 seconds, impose immobility protocol. There was a loud whirring sound like the wind-up of a heavy generator, and the two subjects suddenly locked in place, immovable, eyes shut, arms and hands down at their sides. They looked like statues or mannequins. Initiate final transfer countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. The subject's chamber suddenly filled with a whirling kaleidoscope of colored particles. At the 5 count, the swirling rainbow split into 2 distinct cylinders, surrounding the subjects with their own individual multi-hued tornado until nothing could be seen except for the brilliant twin whirlwinds. Then came the order, dual transfer test number 1 in 3, 2, 1, initiate. There was a noticeable click throughout the entire system, followed by a visible vibration of the jumbled cables and hoses atop both chambers. Slowly the 2 spinning patterns in the subject's chamber began to dissipate, while in the second chamber the patterns began to appear. The effect was like pouring 2 columns of twirling holiday decorations into another. According to the countdown clock, now displaying elapsed time, it took just under 7 long anxious minutes for cubicle number 1 to drain entirely into cubicle number 2. Just when the announcement of transfer complete was heard, a dazzling thread of silver shot down from the top of the chamber, wrapped itself around the 2 pillars, then vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Elapsed time, no more than 3 seconds. "What the hell was that?" yelled one of the team. There was a sudden palpable tension, then a flurry of activity for the next 4 minutes while the process reversed, the swirling patterns faded. Transfer complete was declared when the subjects appeared in cubicle number 2. Then there was a general gasp by some of the observers, and at least one suppressed scream was heard as the subjects promptly collapsed unconscious to the chamber floor. The 2 persons who appeared were a jumble of human parts. The male had long blonde hair, the female's was a short brown. But most noteworthy was that the transfer process had exchanged their lower halves, underwear included. "Medical team, get them out of there." A group of white-coated staffers rushed in with 2 gurneys. The 2 subjects were quickly loaded onto them and whisked away to whatever medical facility had been prepared in the hopes that it would never be needed. But it was needed, and now. The normally unflappable Director Transom gasped in horror and anger, then shouted, "Dr. Vellenor, report to my office as soon as you can." When Dr. Vellenor was finally sitting in his office after several interminable hours, the director had had several hours to thrash his nerves and worry about the future of his pet project and the company in general. "What happened?" "Well," was the tentative reply while nervous hands shuffled through a stack of reports' computer readouts. "We found a loose coupling in one of the transduction coils above number 2. It resulted in a tiny leak that caused the unplanned starburst flash in the chamber and interfered with the spatial interfaces. Medical has found no significant physiological damage in either subject, discounting of course their exchange of body parts." "No damage? Are you kidding? We turned them into freaks." "But the entire system is being inspected, and we believe that we reverse the process and restore them." Dr. Transom sat back with only nominal relief. "But will they agree to subject themselves to your, reversal after what they've already been through?" "Already covered. They both regained consciousness just before I left to see you, and they agreed because they didn't want to remain as they were." "Good God, man, I'd kiss them if they were here." "So when can you be ready again?" "Probably late tomorrow. There's a lot to do, and some detailed repair work to complete. The subjects won't be happy about the delay, but it can't be helped." "Well, make it quick. We have to have good results to report to the board in a couple of days." 2 beds in a small medical facility deep in the bowels of the corporate complex were being fussed over by several people brandishing stethoscopes. Arlene was staring at her husband with a wry grin plastered across her full rosy lips. "Well, Dear, she chortled, you always liked my long blonde hair. So how do you like it now? He blew at the flaxen strand across his mouth, then turned his head and brushed away the curtain of curls so he could see his wife. It keeps getting in the way. I've asked for something to tie it back, but I don't think they care. He stared at her for a moment, then added, actually, you look kinda cute with my short brown style. You could actually pull it off, but this. He filled his fist with a weight of pale curls, just isn't me at all. True, she laughed, but what about those girly parts? Now that's something you always enjoyed about me, my love. Yeah, but I never wanted them for myself. And it's kinda uncomfortable down there, kinda squishy. She curled her lip. That's a gross overreaction. I'm not complaining about all this clutter between my thighs or these horribly hairy legs. Yeah, well I guess we're both up the proverbial creek if they can't our parts put back together correctly. I sure they're doing their best, she replied without much confidence. But meanwhile, how do you get this damn thing to lay down? His laughter was so deep and loud that it brought the medics rushing to see what was wrong. Day 2 and the couple was back in cubicle number 2. Repairs have been made, Dr. Velinor explained to them, but we need to reverse the process so the system can duplicate and correct the anomaly and restore your physical profiles. This is so damn awkward, Mr. Smith groaned when the door was sealed. Yeah, was her reply, all that hair down there is itchy. Both smirked uncomfortably while those who noticed their expressions wondered why. Finally, the countdown started and the process was reversed. On the same markers, everything was meticulously duplicated until the couple began to reappear back in their original location. Unfortunately, the silver vein also flashed just as quickly as before. Damn it, barked Manager Velinor, how the hell did that happen again? Then he watched with anxious trepidation as the test couple materialized, and initially seemed to have been restored. And even more gasps of shock were heard when they reappeared. On the positive side, their hair was restored, and below the neck their torsos and lower halves were now properly realigned, and they didn't pass out. But sadly, complete success was elusive. Their heads didn't match their bodies, and their voices matched their heads. I think I'm going to be sick, groaned Adam Smith when he couldn't tear his downward gaze away for the significant cleavage on his chest. Arg, don't you dare, scolded Arlene, at least not until you're near a trash can. So now what, Varley? Asked Dr. Transome. I'm not exactly developing a good feeling about getting out of this. You're not the only one, Soul. But we found a glitch buried in the transponder code, and I'm going to give the IT tech who found it a huge bonus 'cause it was buried so deep in the millions of lines. She's a genius by anyone's standards. Maybe, but that doesn't mean there are other, glitches buried in the chaos you call a process. I'm confident that everything possible has been done. If we don't succeed this time, then I'll resign and you can find someone else to fix it. I hope that's not necessary, but don't doubt that I'll do it if it comes to that. Understood. Now, as before, the Smiths have agreed to one more test tomorrow. The test couple were housed in a small dorm-type room with double bed and its own bathroom while they waited overnight for the next test. They were back in their original clothing, although the attire went with the bodies, not the heads. Arlene seemed to be unaffected, but Adam was not a happy test subject, not at all. Well, I got my hair back, Arlene preened. Adam shivered beneath the soft gray silk blouse and short black mini skirt. Yeah, but that girly gesture with those broad shoulders has me creeped out. He pulled at the straps on his shoulders. Geez, how do you live with these harnesses wrapped around your chest all day? The damn thing itches and digs into my skin. Would you rather go without? You'd certainly make most of the males around here happy if you did. Humph, was his only response. And by the way, try keeping your legs together when you sit. She contemplated him for a moment. You know, I never noticed before, but if you let your hair grow you might make a reasonably attractive woman. He grimaced and crossed his shapely bare legs. Let's hope this doesn't last past tomorrow, so we'll have to find out. Party crasher, she countered, then leaned over and kissed him. Later, after a long evening of teases, jokes, and playful bantering, mostly by Arlene, they finally decided to try getting some rest. Arlene had disrobed to her boxers and was waiting on the bed. Adam stood there in panties and bra. There's nothing for me to sleep in, he complained. You could just go commando, she chuckled suggestively. Not a chance, he gruffly replied. I don't like sleeping in the nude except when, gulp. Yes, she playfully asked, then added, oh, don't be such a ninny. I don't want to do anything about our situation either. Why don't you look in that closet? Maybe there's something there. He scurried off and after a moment found something. Oh crap, they've got to be kidding. When he turned back into the room carrying a wad of diaphanous lavender material. I'm gonna kill the bozo who gave us this room. Arlene shrugged. You always like it when I wear stuff like that. What's so different now? You've certainly got the body for it. Now stop your incessant complaining and get ready for bed. I want to get at least some rest before we have to go through that monstrosity of a process again. I'll change in there. While Adam lurched forlornly toward the bathroom, Arlene noticed that his wide hips were swaying a lot more than they had earlier. She thought, I wonder if he realizes that my body is taking him for a ride? When he returned she did a classic double take. Damn hon, that skimpy little thing sure makes my body look hot. I think I'll stuff it in my bag and take it home when we're done here. And you're welcome to it. I feel like a piece of meat on display. That's the whole point, my dear, and you should be the first one to appreciate it. You sure would if you had my vantage point. He crawled into bed and pulled the covers over himself. Just shut up and go to sleep. And don't you dare try anything. I'm not in the mood and I know precisely where to aim my knee if necessary. Oh, ouch. Ugh, this takes awkward to a whole new level, Adam grumbled after they were once again in position in cubicle number 1 and only their skivvies. Of course, Adam was wearing the translucent bra and panties. The process proceeded exactly as it had on the first day, but with far more success. In fact, when the couple reappeared, they were fully and completely intact. Everything appears nominal, so it's our consensus that the third process made all the necessary corrections and our tests have been restored to their original profiles. Dr. Vellenor reported to Director Transom. Excellent. When will you be able to work with the second test pair? Well, we have a huge pile of data to sift through. In addition, I've ordered all teams to review their components with meticulous detail, especially the coding and mechanics. I'm afraid we'll need a few weeks, at least. Ugh, the board isn't going to like that. It sets our schedule back a bit, not to mention the hit in the budget to satisfy the Smiths. We're probably lucky that they took our huge severance offer and agreed to honor the non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, I suppose. So have they been released yet? Yes. Completely relieved to be back in their own bed, Adam pulled out the bank draft that they'd accepted. We'll never have to work again, unless we want to. He stared in amazement at the 8-figure amount, which demands a delicious celebratory libation. She took the 2 tall flutes of champagne from the nightstand and handed one to her spouse. Their glasses clinked together. Here's to a future together that we never could have imagined. And to whatever it brings. There was a long pause while the delicious liquor was enjoyed. Honey, now that we don't have any financial worries, how do you feel about trying to start that family we were planning to have when we could afford kids? Adam was stunned. Well, given the circumstances. Come on, you were the one who wanted to start anyway, and I convinced you that we were too young. She pulled him down into a long, passionate kiss. Tongues wrestled, the notorious lavender nightie was discarded, along with the matching panties and a pair of boxers. Fingers caressed the contour of a generous breast, a mouth engulfed a turgid nipple, and a delicate feminine hand grasped her partner's manhood. Adam pushed aside blonde waves and stared down at the handsome man pleasuring her bosom. There was a delicious triangle of pleasure between breasts and groin. It felt only natural that her hand should guide Arlene's turgid member into her. I think you should call me Arlene now, she purred. I'm going to like being Adam, my love, he declared, then went completely silent for a very long time. About that family, the wonderfully satisfied woman who had only had breasts for 2 days. Was the exhausted response. How about we just let nature take its course? Her partner grinned. Fine with me, and the sooner the better. In fact, my period ended the day before we did that insane test, so I was probably ovulating. Maybe I spoke too soon. The first Smith progeny, a boy whom they named Solomon, was born exactly 9 months later, and many more are planned.